Welcome back, Multi-Battle Conference. We are here with another draft analysis. This time we don't have the team here to talk about it with us, so we're just gonna do our normal thing, minus everything that we usually ask of the other team. So we'll go through the draft here. We'll go through the grades, our pros and cons, and that'll be about it. It'll be a little bit of a shorter video than usual. So. We are talking about the Wet N Wild Wailords draft today, Joe and Sierra. They started off with the VGC Classic Incineroar, followed by another A tier in Tapu Bulu, grabbing an S tier in Nihilego afterward, moving into a Trick Room mode with Bronzong and Araquanid, then grabbing Flygon from down in C tier, moving on to their Chansey Shuckle mode that everyone's been talking about, and rounding out the end of the draft with their Vullaby and Grapploct. So, do you have any just initial general thoughts on this draft?
Well, at least the first three, the top three, kind of look something similar to what if you played VGC in 2017, you know as the ban or Bulu, Arcanine, Nihilego. This was obviously pre-Intimidate Incineroar. That released in the middle of 2018. So this was a core that was popular in 2017, but they replaced the fire type with probably a better fire type in Incineroar, and actually helps it a lot. One of the main things was kind of getting like a Grassy Seed Nihilego, with Tapu Bulu being able to have grassy terrain to kind of help from its times 4 weakness, Incineroar swapping in and out, making sure that or Arcanine at the time swapping in and out with Intimidate, making sure that you really keep your physical attackers weak, because obviously Nihilego only has a what's it called, a base 47 defense stat. So with the Grassy Seed plus mitigating the damage with stuff like, Intimidate, Incineroar has Parting Shot. You can really make the Nihilego bulky, and then now with Dynamax, you can get it rolling with, Stab, what is that, Max Ooze, a Stab rock move that will actually boost your special defense by a decent amount. So this Nihilego can really prove to be super threatening. You got two really good tools with it, and kind of, like the band core back in the day. And then Bronzong, Araquanid, strong, Trick Room mode. Flygon just seems like they had a need for a Tailwind user. Also gives them a Dragon type to kind of fill out the, fantasy core with the Dragon, Steel, and Fairy with the the Bronzong and the Tapu Bulu.
I'm
Their
wondering.
Chansey mode. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if a ground type isn't more important in that slot actually.
Yeah,
So
I could
just a
definitely see
thought,
that.
yeah.
Their Chansey mode, and then obviously the Volibee Grapple Locked, the Dark and Fighting types there. Interesting. Volibee has a decent support move pool. Also can be decently bulky with Eviolite too.
Yeah, it's really just a Mandibuzz with an Eviolite. It gets basically all the stuff you would
Yeah.
want on a Mandibuzz.
Obviously, Chansey, you're gonna want to put the Eviolite on that most of the time.
Yeah.
But if you end up bringing it,
Yeah, it's not something. The Chansey's not something they're gonna bring every single week.
yeah. Overall, the top of their draft is really nice and synergizes decently.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The only weird part about this new version of the Bulu Arcanine Nihilego core is that that was back in 2017 when grassy terrain was going to be able to protect Nihilego from most physical ground type attacks because
Scarf Garchomp.
for example,
That
yeah,
was flying
like
around all the time.
but mostly because they hadn't given a lot of Pokemon Stomping Tantrum on high horsepower yet. Stomping Tantrum was it was in the original Sun and Moon games, but it wasn't a tutor move until Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and then of course high horsepower coming in as a TR in Generation 8. I think it was just Mudsdale that had it prior to that, and maybe a couple other mons. I think Snorlax used to get it, but
Yeah.
so there is some decent synergy there, at least for Pokemon that are still relegated to using Earthquake, like Landorus, but It's not quite as potent as it used to be, if that's what they're planning on doing. I expect to see that at least, once or twice with the grassy seed Nihilego. Anyway, so let's go ahead and move on to our grades here. Their drafting grade, we gave them a B plus. A lot of this stuff we really liked, but there were some notable things about the way they drafted that didn't really allow us to push them into that A range. I think the first two picks, the Incineroar and Bulu, are really good. I think grabbing high value A tiers in the beginning rounds is always a legitimate strategy. Especially if you're not, if you don't have any of the really high value S tiers at your disposal, which I think they actually did. They were in the first half of the draft. I think they were like 8th or something. I think they were 8th. So we talked about this a little bit when we were talking to Jared about the Rainbow Raiders draft. They were able to get Togekiss down in the middle, kind of the middle of the pack, and that's also where we saw Glastrier and Tapu Fini go too. And those are some of the Pokemon that we think are most valuable in S tier. And it is a little bit weird to see the Wailords going straight for A tier when those Pokemon were still available. I think most or all three of those were still on the board when they picked Incineroar, which is a little bit weird, but it's also hard for us to knock an early A tier draft. So
I think it's notable to mention that this is their first season.
Yeah.
And that in multi-battle, there's a reason why Incineroar is not an S tier. Anybody that's played VGC understands the defensive pivot that it is, but it's not as versatile as it is in VGC, where it can switch in and out. So
yeah, it's
not. That's something to do with their number 1 overall pick as well.
Yeah, it doesn't really have the kind of maneuverability that it does in VGC. It's like if you parting shot out and then just switch it back in for whatever you want, or like something takes a KO and you can just bring Incineroar in for free. It's not always like that because your Pokemon are just restricted to the one side that they're on. So it does make me wonder if they kind of just saw Incineroar in A tier instead of S and sort of just thought, oh man, that's a steal, and then picked it up without really wondering why it was in A tier. It's totally possible they do know and also are just acknowledge that it was a powerful A tier, because it is
a lot of good tools.
It still is, it still is a high value A tier. I don't think you have to be unaware of the differences between Incineroar in multi-battles versus VGC in order to pick it. It's still a good Pokemon. But it is something that I wondered about. Even so, I like those two picks in the beginning. Going back up to S tier for Nihilego, since it forms this kind of combo here with Blue and Incineroar, is pretty good. They got two valuable A tiers in the beginning, realized that something that works well with them in S tier was still available after pretty much everybody had picked up the S tiers they're going to take. Not everybody, but most people. And I also do like the early Trick Room mode.
Yes.
That's something that a lot of teams seemed to not be able to get. It was a really solid Trick Room mode, and I think they were able to do a pretty good job of getting a good one. Even because they picked it so early. Like we were talking about this with Jared earlier tonight too. He waited a little bit too long to get a Trick Room Sweeper. Ended up picking his Slowking and the Trick Room Setter first, when he was trying to pick that up in the second half of the draft, instead of slot 4 and 5 like Joe and Sierra did here. Mm-hmm. And he missed out on really a good Trick Room Sweeper at all because he waited too long for that. Yeah. So I do like that they pulled the trigger on that earlier, and they got a really good Trick Room mode because of it. And even though we usually talk about base 30s as the kind of the benchmark we want for Trick Room Setters and especially Trick Room Sweepers, these two are only at base 33 and 42. But I don't think that matters here quite as much, because I I think both Bronzong and Araquanid are strong enough to blow through a lot of other teams and even some other slower Trick Room modes because they are really powerful and have a lot of bulk on them. The Araquanid especially, that
Yeah.
132 special defense is pretty impressive, and if you just shore up that defense stat a bit, you can, especially with Incineroar's Intimidate, like
exactly.
it's yeah, I think that's it's a pretty good Trick Room mode, even though they're not hitting the speeds that we usually want to see. I still think it's powerful.
Yeah. And
So
room service is a viable option on Araquanid because
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily need an item.
right, its ability is the important thing.
Yes.
It's hard to put something. It's hard to put room service on something like a Marowak
Mm-hmm.
because its unique things comes from that item. So even though it wants to be slower, it's often difficult.
Or
for
even
it
like
to
a
do so.
Rhyperior that likes, a
Yeah.
weakness policy, stuff like that. Araquanid definitely could do well with a room service there.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely like it with that. I could see him going for that. So I think if their draft had followed how good I think their 1 through 5 picks are, we'd probably give them an A minus or even an A for their draft grade. But their bottom half of the draft is not quite the same in our eyes. Flygon seems like kind of maybe this seems too strong, but almost like a desperate attempt at getting a decently fast tailwind setter out of one of the lower tiers. Maybe because they knew they wanted to pick Chansey and they couldn't afford to grab anything else in B tier if they were going to get it. But Flygon is a very underwhelming Pokemon since C tier for a reason, and I often say there are good things in C tier. You just have to sort through the trash in order to find them. I don't think Flygon is like trash, but it's not one of the C tier gems. It's a little bit underwhelming, and it's gonna struggle to really do much damage or anything if you don't get like a Dragon Dance up or something. So I think it's probably more just an attempt to grab a Tailwind setter, which they could have done earlier. I get that they were trying to go for something else with their 1 through 5 picks, but they probably could have kept the high value picks and the good synergy and still, finagled a Tailwind in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But even so, I don't think it's terrible. The one thing I do have an issue with is this Chansey. There are a lot of reasons I'm not really convinced that Chansey's going to be good here. We'll save the details on that for a little bit later, but I think it's just I don't think it's a good pick, and I think it's, if you're gonna go for Chansey stuff, you probably can wait until the end of the draft, maybe get a couple other things out of those lower tiers that are a little bit more valuable, because I don't really see anybody picking up Chansey. Maybe Shuckle. Because Shuckle has a little bit of a history in our league, even though it's been a while since it's actually made an appearance.
Been drafted at all.
Right. So I could have maybe. I think I would have liked the Shuckle at number 9 and Chansey at number 10 instead, even if they're still picking up the Volibee and Graplocked, which I think are decent. Graplock is an okay C tier fighting type. Volibee is actually decent for its tier. Especially if you put an Eviolite on it, it's going to do all the same stuff Mandibuzz does. Not going to be that much worse at it, so I think it's a good pickup for the tier. But I couldn't really justify giving them an A or an A minus with partially with the Flygon thing, but also because of the Chansey Shuckle. I don't think that was. I don't think it was worth drafting at all, and I definitely don't think it was worth drafting before the end of the draft.
Yeah. I think that's fair. For synergy, we gave them an A minus. Reason being is because at the top of the draft, it just works really well together. You have the essentially that band core, the Incineroar, Tapu Bulu, Nihilego, with a strong Trick Room mode, the Bronzong, the Araquanid. You can also see they have all the type synergies in there, or the main type cores in there, I should say. You have the fantasy core with the Bulu, the Bronzong, and the Flygon. You have the fire, water, grass core with the Incineroar, the Araquanid, and the Tapu Bulu. And then you have the fighting Dark Psychic Core with the Bronzong, the Volibee, and the Grapploct. So I mean they're there, but I mean it's not really. It doesn't. I wouldn't say that those particularly add to the grade. It's just more that they're there. Um, but the main thing, honestly, that I would like to hit on is just how well the Bronzong and the Araquanid really help each other out. As far as just like their typing is, and them being a little bit weak to ground types as well. The Araquanid and the Bronzong work perfectly right there. Having the Tapu Bulu, those top tier picks that can really resist ground because you have the Incineroar, you have the Nihilego, where ground can really pin those particular Pokemon down. You have the ability to consistently swap those around and have multiple ground resists on the side, whichever side you decide to have them on. Whether you want to have the Bronzong behind the Incineroar or the Araquanid behind the Nihilego. Even the Tapu Bulu, can work well behind either of those to where they're good switch-ins to ground types. The Flygon obviously works as well with Levitate. So I feel that they did a decent job with that. Chansey Shuckle, I'm kind of on board with you, Matt. I don't know how good this is going to be, particularly in multi-battle, but it is a combo. At the end of the day, and it's something that they do synergize well together with their lower speed stat, and it adds an extra layer of dimension to their Trick Room mode, makes it extra threatening because they could set Trick Room and sweep you with Araquanid, but they can also do the Chansey Shuckle stuff too. So I think because of that, it does kind of help a little bit on their a little bit for their synergy grade because those two do work well together, and they have that combo. The Volibee Grapploct, the Grapploct is interesting. Who knows if they can make it work. It's got a decently low speed stat. They're Araquanid and Hit basically they speed tie. So, and the Volibee, like you said, is basically like Mandibuzz Jr. I don't know if they're going to be coming a lot together.
Yeah.
If you're probably going to only see one at a time, if anything. Only because I think the top of the draft is just so powerful. You're gonna want those five. They're just so good. In general, I don't. If you leave one of them on the bench, it just doesn't seem they synergize so well together. All five of them. That if you pull one out, it seems like it's really hurting the core entirely. So
Yeah.
Because of that, you're gonna be limited to only a few of these, and that's kind of one of the reasons too why we didn't give them a higher grade because a lot of this other stuff, like you're gonna bring those top five, then okay, then you only have room for one more. You're gonna bring Chansey or Shuckle, you need both of those, and are you gonna leave one of those on the bench? Your other very powerful Pokemon on the bench to run that. I mean, if you decide to go and drop Araquanid so that way you can get Bronzong set up, that's your entire Trick Room mode right there. If that gets blown up, all your pressure just goes out of the water, So. Yeah, I think I do like the synergy a lot, but they have a lot of ground resist for something that obviously is times 4 weak to ground, and then their top pick is obviously weak to ground as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the Fire Water Grass core is particularly powerful, and the way that they're able to support the Nihilego I think is significant as well. So A minus for me seems really good.
Yeah, definitely very good synergy. Threat level, we gave him another B plus. This I think is kind of similar to to a lot of the stuff we've touched on in both of these last two metrics. The top of the draft is really good in this area as well. Not so much the bottom half. Incineroar is very threatening in a lot of ways. Almost in some ways similar it's similar to an annoying prankster Pokemon, not in that it's moving first and disrupting you with a Thunder Wave or a Charm or whatever, but like it can
reliably get a move off.
Right. It's good at reducing opposing damage. It's Intimidate is obviously one of the best abilities historically in doubles or multi battles. Damage mitigation with Snarl and Parting Shot are they're just so irritating to go up against. They're so annoying. It's to the point where we ran Mist to prevent that stuff from happening last season. So Um, and it can even be like moderately threatening offensively. I mean, I've seen like Dynamax weakness policy Incineroars
Yeah.
before. 115 base attack is nothing to sneeze at.
Yep.
It can definitely do some really good damage when it's especially because it's setting up the sun for itself. It's not the same kind of offensive threat uh, you would think something like Bulu or Nile or Araquanid is, but like it's still that potential is still there.
Yeah.
Uh, Bulu, I think, is even more threatening. Maybe it's a little bit more obvious because it's more of an offensive powerhouse. 130 base attack with grassy terrain and attacks like as strong as Woodhammer. Um, Even if that's not as powerful as it used to be with the 50% terrain boost last generation, it's still very powerful. It's a lot of damage, and I think it's a very good max option as well. A lot of Pokemon with 4 times weaknesses are a little tricky to Dynamax because sometimes you can just get blown up by a max move of that type. It's a little bit easier to deal with that with Bulu because its 4 times weakness is one of those max moves that has its base power reduced.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit easier to tank those max oozes compared to like, let's say Nihilego trying to tank a physical max quake.
Yeah.
So it's 4 times weakness is it's not terrible as far as those go. I think poison and bug are probably some of the ones that you would most want to have if you have to have a 4 times weakness. But yeah, it's a very powerful offensive threat. It can be run a lot of different ways. Life Orb or like even Choice Scarf. You can run it bulky. You can do like a sub seed set or something. You're gonna get a lot of recovery back if you have like grassy terrain and leftovers and leech seed all at the same time. It even gets a couple decent utility moves like taunt and it can do a lot of stuff and it's very offensively threatening. Nihilego I think is probably even more of an offensive threat, especially now given that it likes to run that power herb meteor beam stuff. Anything with beast boost, frankly, is a huge offensive threat, and I think that's especially for something like Nihilego. It's got a great speed stat. Its damage output is great with 127 base special attack. Being able to get that special attack boost immediately if you're running that power herb stuff is really nice, and then you can just Dynamax it afterward for a 140 base power max Rockfall, so you don't have to deal with the 2-turn move afterward. And it can even set up Trick Room and be really bulky if it's got that grassy seed set up next to the Bulu. So it can do a lot of stuff. It's very powerful. Bronzong is even kind of a threat.
Yep.
It's mostly just good at being support. It's good at taking hits and setting up Trick Room fairly reliably. But it can even become a surprising threat if you set up a couple iron defenses and start body pressing things. That's big.
Gravity hypnosis too.
Oh yeah, it gets that now. That's fun. Or at least well it gets that through transfer moves. I would think. Araquanid also very threatening for obvious reasons. Water Bubble is just incredibly powerful even with a lackluster attack stat like this.
Yeah. It's just...
And with how bulky this thing is, it's a great Trick Room sweeper even if it's
Yeah.
not as slow as you want it to be. So it's pretty straightforward what this thing is about. You blow things up with big water attacks.
That's where the threat level ends.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the Flygon, like I mentioned, pretty underwhelming. The stats are just not great. I think the Chansey and Shuckle out of these last 4 or these last 5 they probably have the best the highest threat level among them. But at the same time, the Chansey, if it's just doing regular Chansey stuff, if it's just benefiting from the Shuckle's guard split, or if it's setting up defense curls or minimizes or something like that and just wants to, I don't know, toxic stall or just seismic toss stuff, it's going to have a hard time doing that quickly enough because of the timer, the 20-minute timer. And this is really why we don't like Chansey very much in this format and why we don't generally think it's a good pick. The 20-minute timer in Generation 8 multi-battles is a big problem. 6v6, the difference in game length between 6v6 and 4v4 doubles is very surprising. And even without stall tactics like Chansey, we saw a lot of games go to time last season. And if your opponents know to start timer stalling immediately when they see Chansey in team preview, which is frankly what they should be doing, it's going to be really hard to close out games with this thing. So I think it's threatening. It's threatening if your opponents don't really know to do that, and it can be threatening if you get it going fast enough, or if you're able to blow up enough of the opponent's team to where Chansey can just bulk it out and win in the end. Maybe you have like a couple of Pokemon behind it. One of your sides goes down and the other one still has 3 Pokemon on it, and Chansey can stall enough to get your opponents down to 2 and win on time. But, you know, it's just not a consistent way to win.
Here's the main problem, in my opinion. You don't need Chansey to go to timer. It just happens naturally a lot of times.
Yeah.
You have 2 people that are communicating constantly. So by the time somebody sees that you have Chansey out on the field, it's very easy to be like, okay, well, we're taking all 60 seconds, and this game naturally is just going to go to time. Because you don't need to... You almost have to bring out the Chansey. You have to take a KO, bring out the Chansey immediately, and start right away. Because that's how many turns you need to make it to be threatening. You know? So, I think... it's almost kind of funny because in Generation 7, when we saw Chansey come out, what was that, in 2018? That's when it made like a decent little run where, you know, you could do minimize stuff and kind of, you know, do all that. And I think Serapis ran it in Dallas. Jeremy ran it in Dallas. But the point being is that had like a weird timer that was just enough time to let Chansey get set up and kind of wreck damage and wreak havoc. I feel like this timer might be too quick for it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think that's the biggest problem, is that it's just too fast to even allow the Chansey to get set up.
Yeah, when we have games consistently going to time without any kind of stall tactics being used anyway, it's not going to be a good win condition for this kind of format.
I mean, we had a very hyper offensive team, and we went to time a couple of times, you know, and even in finals, you know, we had like 4 Pokemon left at the end of it, and we were pinned, but you know, we still had Pokemon at the end of it.
Right. It still was going to take longer than 20 minutes for them to actually knock out the rest of our stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's that just reduces the threat level from this Chansey Shuckle stuff quite a bit. Shuckle is at least more threatening than Chansey with the power split stuff or the power swap, I think.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a gimmick also. You know, we lost to it mostly because we just it was our first season of draft, and we kind of thought like, they're not going to bring it, so we just didn't prep for it. And that was a mistake. But as long as your opponent preps for it and is aware of what it's going to do, it might be hard to really get that setup off, because you do, in order to make it really work, you do need the trick room and the power swap.
Well, you know, we're close with Hector and Brian, and they told us that after they used it on us, it never worked again.
Yeah.
Because teams prepped for it.
Right, exactly.
You know? So it's one of those things that it does require a surprise tactic, and we got memed on so hard that there's no way that anybody's ever going to get caught off guard by it.
Yeah.
You know, It's just one of those things. Like,
even if it works,
it's going to happen once, and that's it.
Yeah, even if it works like once for this team, it's unlikely to work again, even if they try it again. So, yeah, it is kind of threatening, but also kind of not at the same time. Yes. I think a lot of the last half of this draft just it reduces their threat level quite a bit. I think it would probably be up at an A- if the threat level was consistent from the first half, because you know, Chansey and Shuckle, they do make it they make the draft more threatening in a way, but
Mm-hmm.
I think they hurt the threat level more than they help it.
Yeah.
So
For versatility, we gave him a B plus. Um, really the versatility comes at the the top half of the draft. It's just really good in general. The Nihiligo could either go bulky grassy seed, as we said. A life orb variant can be good. A power herb variant can be good. Incineroar has access to a lot of things. We've seen so many different types of Incineroar being ran. We saw a choice scarf Will-O-Wisp being ran. Tapu Bulu also can actually run kind of a different sets. Bulky leech seed variants. If you're really gonna go for time, like that's a decent strat too. Horn leech with leech seed, bulky. If you go with grassy seed on that, you can. Um, Bronzong, as we talked about, has gravity hypnosis, has body press, iron defense stuff. It has just general so good support. It gets access to safeguard, so it can protect you against stuff like status. It's a good trick room user, obviously. So I think in general, Bronzong can be very good as well. As far as versatile, Araquanid not so much. Water stab,
yeah,
poison jab maybe.
it kind of has one thing that it
It gets
does.
wide guard.
Yeah, and that's
That's
nice.
yeah, that can be nice.
Pretty situational in this kind of a format, but
Yeah.
it's an option. It's nice to have, I suppose.
I think Flygon can be versatile a little bit too. It does have an okay move pool. It's one of those situations that we talked about before in a couple other drafts. Like it can do other stuff, but it can do nothing very well.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably suboptimal to use like it in any other way than probably just taking advantage of its BSC. Like going with a choice band and taking advantage of its 100 base speed, or Dynamaxing and boosting with ground moves, dragon moves. I think it gets decent coverage too. It gets bug moved as well, U-turn.
Yeah, it gets Bug Buzz, U-turn, gets
So
Flamethrower. I think it gets some dark coverage.
the other stuff it's just tough. There's not really gonna do much outside of just kind of being there and doing what it regularly does. The Chansey Shuckle stuff, it's gonna do what it does. Volibee, it's a support Pokemon. I mean, I guess it gets foul play, but for the most part, you're not really worried too much about it.
It's just doing Mandibuzz stuff.
Yeah,
It's sort of easy to attack around it. Maybe if you taunt it, that's gonna shut
yeah.
it down. Like, doesn't have a whole lot of stuff it's gonna do. You kind of know what to
But the
expect.
versatility really comes at the top of the draft because you
Yeah.
can change any of those sets and you can make it very very difficult for the other team and basically pull out a bunch of different win conditions here. I mean, honestly, you look at the top five there and they're just I like them a lot. Probably the only criticism I have is that the team as far as the top five is concerned is a little slow. 103 base speed, Nihiligo. It's okay. It's not great though. And especially considering how frail it is as well, like you would like that to be bumped up a little bit. You know, things like Raichu, I think its speed kind of makes up for how frail it is because it hits that like 115 base
110.
speed or 110 speed. I'm sorry, I was thinking about Persian, I think. But that's another good example too, where like that high speed kind of makes up for it. 103 is just not enough, I don't think. I think like 105 and above is probably where I would say it's okay, but yeah,
Yeah.
I it's just I wouldn't feel comfortable with it being the fastest thing on the team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. As far as versatility goes, I think I'm kind of wondering if Graplock has any decent versatility. I think you can boost with probably I assume it gets bulk up.
Yeah.
I know it gets soak. I don't know how useful that is on this team. Um, the its signature move Octolock can do some interesting things. Maybe you lock something in, you soak it, and Tapu Bulu can blow it up, or
Yeah.
maybe you lock something in when after Chansey's gotten set up, and it can just toxic that thing so that the the timer isn't reset by you switching out your badly poisoned mon. I think it can do some good stuff. It's got
Yeah.
decent versatility, but I don't really expect to see it hit the field very often either.
Yeah.
So Also, don't know how how good it is at really doing any of those things. So
Yeah, yeah. I worry about the Chansey Shuckle mode that you might need too much to pull it off.
yeah, for sure.
That it's not just like attacking on mode. But I think overall their versatility is nice. B plus I think is a good spot for him. And overall a B plus. This is pretty much what we're giving most of the drafts that are showing like a lot of good promising Pokemon and good cores at the top of the draft. I think not having this draft not having redirection hurts it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we talked about an Electabuzz might have helped a lot, particularly in that Chansey slot. An electric type that you can throw Eviolite on, which Chansey, obviously needs Eviolite. But you can throw Eviolite on it and redirect things, with Follow Me. So I thought that might have been pretty helpful as well, especially considering that you have 2x4 weak Pokemon. Being able to redirect those attacks into that it's not bad.
Yeah.
So I think I was gonna do the pros, correct?
Yeah.
So we'll just go over these real quick. I mean, there's not really a reason to stay on them too quickly. High value A tiers, we really think that those basically the Incineroar, Tapu Bulu, and the Araquanid, the Fire Water Grass core, really, really good synergy there. I like that they're all kind of around the same speed as well. Even though you don't really have a particularly fast one, you're able to kind of stack them in nice ways. Even if you want to speed creep the other one a little bit to do weird stuff, you're able to do all that because the speeds are all kind of around the same.
Yeah.
The top particular picks, like we were talking about, are very versatile. Particularly in the Incineroar, Nihilego, and Bronzong. Araquanid can do okay things too. I think it has access to wide guard. It has a couple of the punches, right? It gets Thunder Punch, I think, right?
Araquanid? No.
No, Poison Jab though it definitely gets. Yeah. The Chansey Shuckle mode, while we may not think highly of it, the fact of the matter is that if you're playing against it, you have to be able to throw a couple of taunt users on your team. You have to be able to have at least some type of flowchart for when this comes out. Although I think the flowchart a lot of times is just going to be slow the game down entirely. And standard Trick Room mode with Bronzong Araquanid, very basic. Something that we saw with Doesn't Click, I think. They had just Aromatisse and Escavalier. Something that's really basic that can just really put out a lot of offense right away. I think they did that. They took advantage of these two picks right here and were able to right away get something that's super threatening with the Bronzong and Araquanid. And kudos to them, honestly, for taking those two particular roles early, because we saw in the draft that they started going very, very quickly, and a lot of people got left with a very sub-tier Pokemon, or sub-optimal Pokemon in that particular tier. So.
Going into the cons, no redirection. It's kind of unfortunate, but redirection it opens up so many more options for game plans. It allows for much better setup. I don't see too many setup options on this team anyway. I guess you could consider the Meteor Beam stuff on Nihilego setup. There's Iron Defense with Bronzong, Swords Dance on Tapu Bulu. I guess setup would help between the Chansey and Shuckle stuff, not so much if they're together, because you need them both sitting on the field to get that guard split stuff off. But it can help if you're trying to set up defense curls or minimizes with Chansey. It's unfortunate that it's not really here. Chansey, its biggest weakness is that the timer for 6v6 multi battles in Generation 8 sucks. Chansey does not really have time to do what it wants to do when there's only 20 minutes on the clock for the entire game. So that's pretty straightforward. We've kind of beaten that point to death a little bit at this point. Chansey also it prevents the team from being more well-rounded and more threatening by occupying a B tier slot. There's a lot of really good stuff in B tier, and it's a little bit of a disappointment for Chansey to be occupying a B tier slot on a draft with so much other good stuff. We were looking at B tier and looking at what's left at least. We kind of came up with some ideas of better uses for that slot. Electabuzz was one you mentioned. That would give them an electric type, which they don't have, and it would give them redirection, which they don't have. That would be pretty nice. We also thought that maybe some kind of a prankster user, like a Sableye or a Purloin, might be good just to help them help their ability to disrupt what their opponent is doing, or to help something like Nihilego sweep with a fake tears or something like that. Or Noivern was another one that I saw, because if they're wanting some kind of a fast-ish Tailwind user, that seems to be what they're going for with the Flygon, because it doesn't really seem to be good at doing anything else. So if they're willing to have a Dragon type in that Tailwind slot, they could have had something quite a bit faster, something that's actually a decent max airstream sweeper. It doesn't have the greatest special attack, but you know, you can, yeah, it's usable. But it provides some more speed for your team. It's a very fast Tailwind user. And then that would open up this other C tier slot that Flygon is currently in, for them to pick up something maybe a little bit better. If they were really looking for a ground type, they could have gone for maybe even something like Golurk in this B tier slot, and then maybe use this Flygon slot to find a better Tailwind setter, something that can do more than just, you know, set up Tailwind and then be mediocre. I think there's a lot of things that they could have done with that B tier slot that unfortunately they didn't do, because well, they have Chansey. And then they do have the three major type cores that we tend to look for, but there's only one of them that's really solid. And the Firewater Grass core is very, very good. It's more than just solid. We really like it. But these other type cores that they have are just not really cutting it. The Dark Fighting Psychic between the Volibee Graplocked and the Bronzong, it's not much of a core. I don't think the Volibee and the Graplocked are going to be hitting the field all that often. And there's not a whole lot of offensive synergy going on here.
Synergy at all with Volibee and Bronzong. They want completely opposite things.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I mean, Volibee is going to be a bulky Tailwind setter. Bronzong is primarily a Trick Room sweeper. Bronzong is neither of them is really known for their offense anyway. The best thing Bronzong is going to do for as far as offense goes is Iron Defense Body Press. You know, it's not really trying to throw out big psychic type damage. And Volibee, best it has is Foul Play, which is good if you hit the right target, but it's just not very consistent. And then the Graplocked, it's a mediocre C tier fighting type. And then they have that Fairy Dragon Steel core with the Flygon, Bronzong, and Tapu Bulu. Flygon, we've talked about how we think that's pretty mediocre. Bronzong doesn't exactly put out a whole lot of offense. You typically want your Steel type in a Fairy Dragon Steel core to be able to hit opposing Fairy types pretty hard. Which Bronzong can do depending on what it is. It's pretty slow. Its Gyro Ball can do decent damage, but 89 base attack also isn't the highest. And then Tapu Bulu, it kind of just doesn't even really count as a Fairy type.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
It'll
elaborate a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, so those two cores just, they are there technically. The types are there, but they don't really function the way you would want them to. They don't come close to functioning the way that this Firewater Grass core is going to function.
Yeah, I was going to say the reason why Tapu Bulu isn't considered a Fairy type is because it doesn't really have Fairy Stab, unless you consider Dazzling Gleam Fairy Stab.
Right, and nobody's using that.
But, I mean, yeah, it's mostly going to have Grass Stab. It's really going to use its Grass typing. I think you put it well before we started recording. It's basically a Grass type that's more weak to Poison.
Yeah.
And is also weak to Steel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's more or less what it is. It's not really, it doesn't really count as a Fairy type.
Right, and it is a little more complicated than that. There are some more types that have the Fairy typing effects, but like, you know, that's kind
of if it got play rough, this would be a completely different story.
Yeah, funny how one little thing can change things that much, but
also give it Grassy Glide. What's going on with that?
Yeah, well,
but then Lele would have Expanding Force, and that would be a problem.
Yeah, I'm actually more afraid of Coco with Rising Voltage.
Oh, Coco with Rising.
Yeah, I don't want that. But yeah, that'll do it for our analysis of the Wet N Wild Wailords draft. Typically, at the end of the video, we usually like to ask quick series of questions to the other team. We don't have them here to answer those questions for us today, but we're gonna go ahead and answer them ourselves. So the first question we usually ask is what Pokemon is what are you most excited to use? So I guess for us it would be what are we most excited to see them use?
I'll go first. I really want to see the Nihilego, see what they can do with it. I mean, they have so many different sets that they can use. Also, the Flygon, I want them to kind of prove us wrong a little bit. They do have 3 Pokemon that are ×4 weak to stuff in the Bulu, the Nihilego, and the Flygon, but, you know, I don't think it's too bad, honestly. It's just one of those things that it happens. It's not, they're not, I guess the 2 of them are super high tier picks, but, you know,
Yeah.
it's okay. It's workable, so.
I kind of agree on the Flygon. I would like for them to prove us wrong because Flygon is it's just one of those Pokemon that's been done dirty like forever. It's kind of a fan favorite. Everybody loves its design. It's just not a good mon. You know, it's just really mediocre. I'm also gonna put Bulu in the Pokemon I'm excited to see them use because it's just been really overshadowed by Rillaboom since it doesn't have access to that Grassy Glide. So I'm excited to see them make good use of a Tapu that we really don't see much anymore.
Coco and Lele didn't get drafted.
Yeah, that too. It's just Finny and Bulu as far as the Tapus go.
So, the next one is underrated member of the team.
Underrated. I'm gonna go with Araquanid.
Yeah.
Araquanid. I think in last season it didn't get drafted. The season before it did get drafted, but it wasn't used very well. The team that had it wasn't really picking up a lot of wins. It was I think it was a team that we ended up beating 5-0. Not really. They didn't really use it to its fullest potential, but I think it's a really strong Pokemon. It's a really strong Dynamax option. I think people probably see it in the A tier, and they might think it's not really worth it, but I think it is. I definitely think it is. So I think Araquanid. I'm not sure people are giving Araquanid enough respect.
For me, I think I would say Tapu Bulu. Yeah, it's ×4 weak, but I think if you build it right on a week-to-week basis, you can make it be pretty threatening. You know, I think it might be a little easy with its to kind of one-shot it, but I think if you use it correctly, it'll be all right. So I would choose Tapu Bulu. And I guess the last one is what your expectations are. What do you think how do you think they're gonna do? It's their first season.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're good enough to make playoffs for sure. I don't think they're going to end up at the top of their division because one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to be forced to bring their top half of the draft basically all the time, and it's at least going to be predictable which mons that are going to be hitting the field, or they're going to try to make use of the Chansey Shuckle stuff too much, and it's not really going to work very often unless they encounter players who just don't know to timer stall.
Yeah. I think playoffs as well. Look, both Joe and Sierra have played in draft leagues before. I played with Joe a long time ago in like a singles league that SoCal had like years back. So like
he's also very successful in VGC.
Yeah, he's obviously also a very successful VGC player. So like he's not, you know, they're very accustomed to draft. I don't know if they've ever played in multi-battle before, and I think people it is the same as VGC in some ways, but the alternating Dynamax really like trips people up.
Yeah.
The sides being static is also something that you have to take into planning like very early on. I think prep and stuff like that's going to be okay. Like bringing different sets week to week, they'll be fine on that. But yeah. I think the basics of multi-battle are they're going to be a little bit of a learning curve, just because it's like a mode that not a lot of people get to practice in.
Right.
I mean, you can't even replicate the mode on Showdown.
Yeah.
So like,
There was a learning curve for us, and we didn't.
yeah,
even,
absolutely.
We weren't even dealing with Dynamax our first season.
No, it was Megas and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a learning curve in this particular league, but once they pick it up, they'll be okay. They're experienced draft players. They have a good, solid team here that is versatile enough to do well in draft, so they should be all right.
Yeah. All right, that should do it for our analysis of the Wet N Wild Wailords team. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think I gave a prediction. I think that they'll make
Oh, right.
playoffs.
Oh,
Maybe
well,
wild card.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see. There are.
I'm
there are
afraid of their sets being too static, though.
I'm not really.
I'm not saying that they're going to bring the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that like certain things are going to be good in so many situations that like, you know, they're going to be comfortable with. I don't know.
It could be. I'd expect them to change it up more often than not, though. But we'll see.
It's hard to not bring those 5.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good luck, Wailords.
Yep.
We will see you guys on the battlefield. Peace.